I am Pam Diener, an OT in pediatrics, a developmental neuroscientist studying Rett syndrome, and a sibling to a 57-year-old woman diagnosed with Rett. Today, I'll wear my OT hat to discuss the role of occupational therapy in Rett syndrome, focusing on how therapy uses functional tasks to minimize hand stereotypies, to encourage arm movements and their associated postural adjustments, in order to boost the client's attention for and participation in functional tasks. In other words, activities of daily living. I'll also provide some examples of adaptive equipment that can be incorporated at home and at school. At its core, OT promotes health and well-being through occupation, which changes depending on your phase of life, but generally encompasses whatever the needs are for someone to be prepared for and involved in their daily activities of self-care or activities at play or within school. While individuals with Rett have both similarities and unique differences, most are generally dependent in their ADLs. So it's the OT's role to determine how and to what extent each individual's deficit impacts function, and then craft a customized treatment plan centered upon improving motor and cognitive skills, providing positioning, and when and where needed, adaptive equipment to increase participation in their ADLs. ADLs are used because they are meaningful functional tasks that naturally train movement and cognition, as opposed to using rote exercises. Naturally, learning occurs because ADL performance relies on developing many of the building blocks of motor and cognitive skills, such as sensory awareness, postural control, reaching, grasping, eye-hand coordination, sequencing, choice-making, etc., all areas of deficiency in Rett syndrome. Movement is then trained by breaking down ADL tasks into their component parts. Using a backward chaining approach, tasks are taught incrementally, where the last step of the task, the rewarding step, is taught first. As you can see in this video clip, when an individual with Rett syndrome is handed a loaded fork near her mouth, she's practicing only taking the fork to her mouth, the last rewarding step. We then progress to holding the fork closer to the plate to encourage reaching farther to the fork to complete more of the task independently until the whole task is learned. This can take months, which is why goals are incremental, so achievement can be celebrated more often, building confidence. This approach also enhances one's motivation and internal competition to do better, which in turn influences attention span because each person now remains focused, trying harder, staying with the task longer, as it no longer seems hopeless or unattainable. Finally, motor memory, response time, and precision improve due to continued rehearsal and repetition of each step of the task. In the video clip, you may also observe that by working on functional tasks, postural skills, such as sitting erect, are strengthened. This is because when we move our arms away from our body, core muscles become active to resist the shifting gravity as the weight of our arm moves. In other words, our core stops us from falling in the direction of the reach. And by training visual and arm hand reaching and grasping, using varied stimuli in various settings, such as at the dining table and maybe in the tub with bubbles, one demonstrates generalization of learning to any situation rather than just using reaching in one particular condition. So many of you may be thinking if the individual's hands are occupied, they can't reach or grasp. But OTs aim to combat these competing factors such as stereotypies, loss of purposeful arm use, dyspraxia, and postural deficits, and even reduced attention span, because they all affect function and limit exploration of one's environment, which is how typically developing individuals should be learning. So to ensure best treatment outcomes, OTs work closely with families, educators, and the habilitation team to incorporate and integrate multidisciplinary goals related to all of the factors I just mentioned. We begin treatment by first meeting clients where they are and then enhancing their skills to promote independence and improve quality of life. Each session must be meaningful and motivating, so OTs refer to the parents and caregivers who know their child's interest and behavior best. We then observe and evaluate each individual to determine what sensory cues and motor training will be needed to advance their current abilities and minimize their compulsion to perform stereotypies. Attention span can be addressed by adjusting the length of the sessions and the number of breaks given. We can incorporate music, which activates many cortical regions. With its inherent rhythmicity, it encourages body sway, rhythmical muscle activity, and vocalization. keeping the individual engaged and alert and attending. Providing verbal or nonverbal instructions about every 10 seconds gives the individual time to successfully plan and execute a response. This accommodates dyspraxia, but also improves attention as abilities to perform increase. And to promote participation, independence, ease daily care, and enhance quality of life at home, caregivers participate in training to learn about techniques and adaptive equipment that were used in therapy. While therapeutic sessions are structured similarly as I've just described, they must be customized for each individual and carried out several times per week to provide a lot of practice. So let's look at some examples of how OT incorporates these ideas in a treatment session. To meet the individual where they are, that's the first step. We start with regulating or calming techniques to minimize anxiety, often caused by the unfamiliar clinic or simply transitioning to it. Some methods that we use include slow rocking on a therapy ball or hammock, providing calming through deep pressure by rolling a ball with moderate pressure over the body, or bundling in a suspended swing where stretchy material adds extra deep pressure as it resists any spontaneous movement, or massaging lotion into the skin of the arm, hands, and legs. We can also stimulate the vestibular system that's located in the inner ear. It's responsible for receiving sensory input about how we're moving through space and then guides our automatic responses to the direction, orientation, and speed of those movements so that we achieve good postural control to develop the stable base upon which we can move our extremities. The OT facilitates strengthening of balance and core stability by eliciting these spontaneous or automatic reactions after stimulating or when stimulating the vestibular system. To do this, the client is placed on a therapy ball that we move in multiple directions, as you can see here. Both core and arm responses help maintain balance on the ball, but you also see that the postural or protective arm responses interrupt midline stereotypies and facilitate the same movements that we need to reach in these multiple directions. Adding strong citrus sense is a technique that additionally activates proper postural head movements in the direction of the odor to further stimulate postural responses. So repetition of this one activity stimulates the core, minimizes stereotypies, and produces movements that will be needed for reach training in ADLs. Varied sensory input can also be directed at stimulating the specific body parts needed to reach and grasp. We begin by applying deep pressure to the shoulder joints to activate the muscles needed to stabilize these proximal joints so that the shoulder supports the weight of the arm moving away from the body. We apply sensory cues to the skin directly to signal the arm and hand that's to be used. Large feather brushes or placing the client in ball pits can stimulate large surface areas, while soft prickly hand mitts that are placed on either hand can be guided to brush over the face or the arm and hands, so therefore specific or precise body parts. To grip, the hand must recognize what's been placed in it, but often the item is in the same general temperature of the hand, so sensing its presence is hard. However, we can change the temperature of the palm by using warm or cold packs to heighten recognition of the object in the hand, or we can place the item in a warming blanket or in the freezer before placing it into the hand. So you can see that stimulating the senses of touch, sound, vision, and smell under various conditions in each session activates and integrates neural circuitry for receiving, processing, and integrating sensory input needed to plan and execute motor responses. With the body, arm, and hand ready, the OT can then begin facilitating active involvement in the functional ADL task. Specific ADL training begins with the individual's trunk and feet supported for stability after being seated in an appropriate chair. Then stereotypies must be stopped in order to reach for the target. While many recommend the use of passive elbow extension splints, preference is towards, and evidence from my research in this area indicates that the use of less restrictive and more active methods lead to independent cessation of stereotypies and promotion of purposeful arm use. So we use verbal cues, demonstration, hand-over-hand assistance, and gentle holding of the non-active hand to promote concentration on the active hand or arm, as you can see here. With the gentle hand holding that the arrows are indicating, the OT senses when the non-active arm initiates movement to assist in accomplishing the task. We then can remove our hand to allow for follow-through of this movement, or we can lightly assist in guiding that movement so that even the smallest of efforts are rewarded. This training occurs for both the right and the left arm. The self-feeding clip and the image of switch use show that after many months of ADL sessions, independent cessation of hand wringing and grasping becomes a reality. For some, even after strengthening the core, light trunk and pelvic supports are helpful, as you can see by this corner chair and its strap, or through the use of a wheelchair and lateral supports. These are helpful because they allow one to concentrate solely on arm use, because the postural supports are helping with the stable seating. During ADL training, adaptive devices may be used, such as grip assisters or built-up handles and wash mitts, to help with self-care needs when the individual's grip is poor or weak. Cutout cups can assist with oral motor skills to facilitate safe drinking by eliminating the need for head tilt, which can cause coughing and choking. Larger pieces of adaptive equipment for safety in the bathroom and for transfers between surfaces in the home and community can be trialed and discussed with family and caregivers. And your OT will first make recommendations and then demonstrate and train the use of the equipment. To minimize anxiety that may be increased as new devices are trialed and trained, calming music can be incorporated. Finally, each OT session should end similarly to how it began, with a check-in with the family and caregivers in order to report on the day's progress, demonstrate and train activities on the home program, and discuss recommendations and parental concerns, and answer any questions. So like we end in a therapy session, please feel free to share any of your thoughts or questions by sending an email to the address on the slide. Also listed is the URL for clinicaltrials.gov if you would like to learn more about my current research project. Thank you so much for your attention this afternoon.